We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Vav Amud Beis in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 36b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the Machlokas Tanoim in the Mishnah with regards to a field that produces based on rainwater. Rabbi Yishmael said in the Mishnah that you don't need to have 3 full years, rather you just have 3 months from the first year, then the full middle year, and 3 months from the last year. And Rabbi Akiva said it's not 3 months from the first and last year, rather it's 1 month from the first and last year, so you need 1 month from the first year, the full middle year, and 1 month from the last year. And the Gemara suggested that the machlokas between them is whether plowing is enough to create a chazak on a piece of land. The idea would be that according to Rabbi Yishmael, plowing is not enough. You need to actually have produce, so you need 3 months of the first and last year. And Rabbi Akiva says plowing is enough, so 1 month is sufficient. But the Gemara says, does that really make sense? If Rabbi Akiva actually held plowing is sufficient, so afilu yom echad nami, so even 1 day of plowing should be sufficient to establish a chazaka for that first year and for that last year. And so the Gemara says, Ela de kuli alma nir lo have a chazaka. Rather, you have to say that everybody in the Mishnah agrees that plowing is not a chazaka. That's not the kind of work you can do in the field to establish a chazaka. V'hacha pira rabo pira zuta ike beinayu. And here the machlokas is, does it need to produce a lot of fruit, a lot of produce? And according to Rabbi Akiva, it only needs to be a little. According to Rabbi Yishmael, it needs to be a lot. The Rashbam explains, Pira Rabo, Pira Zuta, Ike Benai, Rabbi Yishmael, Svirle. Rabbi Yishmael holds the have a chazaka, Shiyilkat Pira Rabo. It's not a chazaka until the person collects a large amount of produce. Dahainu, Kishenigmara Kol Hatvu. It has to be that all of the crop is finished. Lafikach Tzarech Shlosha Chadashim, can go in Sa'orim, V'shibol L'shul, V'adashim, Shagadelim Begimel Chadashim. Therefore, you need 3 months, like these various kinds of produce that take 3 months. Rabbi Akiva savar pira zuta dahainu can go in shachas. Rabbi Akiva says it could be a smaller produce, something like shachas, which you're feeding to the animals. Shagadol b'shloshim yom, that grows in just 30 days. Have a chazaka, that's a chazaka. Afal pishalon nigmar hatvu, even though it's not finished. Inami can go in yerek, the gedelan hayerakos b'chodesh echad. You have vegetables that grow in 1 month. That's the actual machlokas. That's the ika beinayu. That's the machlokas between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, near Eino Chazaka, that plowing is not a Chazaka. V'yeshomrim hareza Chazaka, and some say that it is a Chazaka. And the Gemara says, Man yeshomrim, who is this yeshomrim that say it is a Chazaka? Amar Rav Chisda says, Rabbi Acha, it's Rabbi Acha. Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Neira Shana v'Zara Beis, let's say he plowed it 1 year, planted 2 years. Neira Beis v'Zara Shana, let's say he plowed it 2 years and he planted 1 year. Ain't a Chazaka, it's not a Chazaka. But Rabbi Acha says, Harezu Chazaka. It is indeed a chazaka because plowing can be a chazaka. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Ashi says, some have the gears of Amar Rav Acha. Rav Acha says, She'elas kol gedolei hador, I asked all of the gedolei hador, I asked all of the great people of the generation, v'yamruli, and they said to me, Nir hareza chazaka, that plowing is a chazaka. Amar le Rav Bevi, Rav Nachman, Rav Bevi said to Rav Nachman, my time demand Amar Nir have a chazaka. What's the reason of the one who says that plowing is a chazaka? Lo avid inish dekrivu le'are v'shasaka. A person is not going to allow someone else to plow his field and be silent. He will protest, and the fact that he does not protest means that it actually is a good chazak. It really does belong to this individual who's plowing the field, and again, you can use that as part of establishing the 3-year chazaka. And the Gemara continues, Umay taima demanda Amar Nir lo have a chazaka. What's the reason of the one who says that plowing is not a chazaka? Meimar Amar, it's because the owner says to himself, Kol shiba v'shiba dekarvu la'ayil bay, every single clump of earth, let it enter the plow, meaning to say he's only doing me a favor by plowing my land, and then I will just go ahead and plant, and I will reap the benefits. Therefore, the owner does not protest, and therefore that's not considered an activity that creates a chazaka. And the Gemara continues, Sholchu le b'nei Pum Nahara l'Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda. The people of Pum Nahara, they sent Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda the following question, Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, teach us our Rebbe, Nira have a chazaka, lo have a chazaka. Is plowing considered to be an activity that creates a chazaka, or it does not create a chazaka? Amar Lui said to them, Rav Acha v'chol gedolei hador amri nir hareza chazaka. Rabbi Acha and all of the great ones of the generation, they say that plowing is a chazaka. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Ribuso lemechshav gavrei, is it a chiddush? Is it something novel to just list a bunch of people who say something, meaning to say we have individuals on the other side of the argument? Harav u'Shmuel beBavel, there's Rav and Shmuel in Bavel, Rabbi Yishmael v'Rabbi Akiva be'Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva in Eretz Yisrael. Amri, they all say, Nir lo have a chazaka, that plowing is not a chazaka. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, Mas Nisan here, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, that's our Mishnah. That's what we just said above, that both Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva agree that plowing is not a chazaka. And Rav Maihi, where do we see that Rav says that plowing is not a chazaka? To Yomer Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, because Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Zu divrei Rabbi Yishmael for Rabbi Akiva, that this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah, meaning when we're talking about these fields that use rainwater in order to produce, so Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva say you don't need 3 full years. Aval Chachamim Omer, but the Chachamim say, Chazkasa Gimel Shanim miyom liyom, the Chazak is 3 years from day to day, meaning that you do need 3 full years, and we understand that to mean, and this is again the statement of Rav, we understand that to mean miyom liyom lemu'utei mai. What does it mean that they hold it's 3 years miyom liyom? What is that coming to exclude? Lav lemu'utei nir, isn't it coming to exclude plowing? It's essentially saying that plowing is not a chazaka. Meaning to say again, lav lemu'utei nir delo, is it not to exclude plowing, which is not a chazaka. And Shmuel Mahi, now Shmuel, where does he say that plowing is not a chazaka? D'Yamar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, because Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, Zu divrei Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Akiva. Again, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Aval Chachamim Omer, but the Chachamim say, Ad sheyigdor shalosh gedeiros v'yivtzor gimel betziros v'yimsok gimel mesikos, that it's a chazaka when you harvest 3 times, talking about dates, yivtzor gimel betziros, that's talking about grapes, when you harvest grapes 3 times, and Yimso Gimel Mesikos is talking about olives, when you harvest the olives 3 times, meaning it's the amount of times you harvest, according to the Chachamim that create a chazaka, but they're talking specifically about the harvesting of the produce, they're not talking about plowing. It seems that Shmuel says that plowing is not a chazaka, and the Gemara finishes, Mai Beinayu, what's the difference between Rav and Shmuel? Amar Abaya, Abaya says, Dekel Nara Ike Beinayu, the difference is a young palm tree, and some have the gear, so that adds Sha'osa Shalosh Pa'amim Bashana, that it produces fruit 3 times in 1 year. And the Rashbam explains, Zu Divrei Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Akiva, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Again, this is the statement of Rav. So Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, they're the ones that say, Di'amri b'masnisin, they say in our Mishnah, Sada Habal Chazkaso Gimel Shanim Ve'ena Miyom Liyom, that by a Sada Habal, which uses rainwater, the chazaka is 3 years, but it's not a full 3 years. Eliyud Ches Chadashim Rabbi Yishmael V'Yudalid Rabbi Akiva, it's 18 months according to Rabbi Yishmael, it's 14 months according to Rabbi Akiva, as we said. But then Rav's statement continues, Aval Chachamim Omrim, but the Chachamim say, Chazkason Shalashanim B'chol Davar Miyom Liyom, the chazaka is going to be 3 years, it's going to be a full 3 years. And the Gemara said, Lav L'Mu'utei Nir, isn't it excluding plowing? Again, that plowing is not a chazaka, and the idea is Afilu Pira Rabo Pira Zuta Kamamait, because we're even excluding over here a large amount of produce or a small amount of produce. We're saying you need the full 3 years, the Kol Shekei Nir, and certainly plowing is not going to be a chazaka. And then we had the proof from Shmuel. D'Yamar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Zu Divrei Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Akiva. Shmuel said this is the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Da'amri b'masnisan aval b'sada ilan. That's talking about the line where they said in the Mishnah about a field of trees, an orchard. It said Konas has tuvuaso, masakazeso, v'konas has kaitzo, hareilu gimel shanim. That again with like 3 harvests, that's considered 3 years. Alma mishaliket gimel peiros b'sada achas b'shana achas b'gimel zmanim. You see, according to the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, if you collect 3 sets of produce in one field in 1 year at 3 different times, zeh achar zeh, one after the other, chashav la chazaka, that's called a chazaka. And then Shmuel goes on to say, but the Chachamim say, it's ad sheyigdor shalosh gedeiros v'yivtzor gimel betziros v'yimsok gimel mesikos. And Rashbam explains, aval Chachamim omrim peiros gimel shanim tzarech. The point over here is that you need the produce of 3 years, ad sheyigdor b'tmarim gimel gedeiros. For example, again by dates, 3 times harvesting, mesikos b'zeisim, again harvesting by the olives. Mesikos is the word that's used when it comes to harvesting olives. So in any case, you see, you have to have these harvests according to Shmuel, and therefore plowing is not a chazaka. And then the Gemara said, Mai Beinaya, well, what's the difference between, and the Rashbam explains, what's the difference bein Rav u Shmuel? What's the difference between Rav and Shmuel? Bein Lamar u bein Lamar, Gimel Shanim Be'inan, aren't they both saying that you need 3 years? Meaning, when Shmuel is saying, but the Chachamim say, Ad sheyigdor shalosh gedeiros v'yivtzor gimel betziros v'yimsok gimel mesikos, it means 3 years as well, and that's what Rav said. He said that the Chachamim say you need to have 3 years. So what is the difference? The difference is dekel nara ika beinayu. The difference is a young palm tree means dekel yalda bechura de pachos migimel shanim shalemos. What that means is that in less than 3 full years, toenes gimel pam, it's able to give 3 times. To Shmuel have a chazaka begimel gedeiros. Shmuel will say there it's the same kind of tree producing the same kind of fruit 3 times. 3 times that's a chazaka. Afagav deleka gimel shanim shalemos. The point is, even though you don't have 3 full years, well, the Rav ba'inan gimel shanim miyom liyom, according according to Rav, you're going to need 3 years from day to day, meaning you'll need a full 3 years. And you do see from the Rashbam that the Rashbam would not have the girsa of sha'osa shalosh pamim bashana, that it produces 3 times in 1 year, because we're not talking about the fact, according to the Rashbam, that it produces 3 times in 1 year. We're just saying it produces 3 times in less than a full 3 years. It doesn't have to be a full 3 years to produce 3 times. And again, according to Shmuel's version of the Chachamim, that is sufficient. You don't need a full 3 years. But according to Rav's version of the Chachamim, you do need a full 3 years. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Amar Rabbi Yishmael says, B'amed devar mamurim, when is this true? Besada halavan, by a white field, meaning to say a grain field. But Rabbi Yishmael goes on to say that when it's talking about a field of trees, an orchard, so then you just need to harvest 3 times. You don't actually need 3 years. And the Gemara says, Amar Abaye says, Mid Rabbi Yishmael nishma l'Rabbanan. From what Rabbi Yishmael says, we can understand what the Rabbanan would say. Hayu lo shloshim ilanos mimata asor lebeisa. Let's say a person has 30 trees, and every 10 trees are planted within a beisa, which is the normal amount. Achal asara b'shanazu v'asara b'shanazu. If he eats, he essentially harvests, produce from 10 in this year, and from another 10 from the second set of 10 in another year, v'asara b'shanazu, and then from the third set of 10 in the third year, harezu chazaka. That would be a chazaka. And the Rashbam explains, Amar Abaye says, Midivrei Rabbi Yishmael nishma lehu l'Rabbanan. From Rabbi Yishmael's opinion, we can understand the Rabbanan, hayu lo shloshim, that if the person would have 30 trees, v'hachi perush, and here's the explanation of the Gemara, says the Rashbam, the Rabbi Yishmael de b'shana achas have chazaka b'sada achas, b'sholosh lekitos, b'shloshem mekomos b'sada. Rabbi Yishmael holds that in 1 year you can make a chazaka in one field if you do 3 different harvests in 3 different parts of the field. That's what Rabbi Yishmael was saying with regard specifically to an orchard. Kediktani, as it says, Kanasas Tevuaso, Masechet, V'chulo. Again, he's going to gather in the dates, he's going to gather in the olives. Again, 3 different kinds of crops in 1 year is a chazaka. Midevar of Nishma Lehul Rabbanan. So now Abaye is saying, from what Rabbi Yishmael says, we can understand the following for the Rabbanan, Depligiole, because they argue on Rabbi Yishmael. They say you need 3 years. Kedam Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel El, just like Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said before. Ubo Gimel Shanim, and they require 3 years. Deleka Pluksa Bein Rabbi Yishmael uvein Rabbanan. The point here is that there's no real machlokas between Rabbi Yishmael and the Rabbanan, Ela b'shana achas v'gimel shanim, except for the fact that Rabbi Yishmael says it can all happen in 1 year, and the Rabbanan say it has to happen over 3 years. Avol kol ma'id amar Rabbi Yishmael b'shana achas, amri Rabbanan b'gimel shanim. But everything Rabbi Yishmael says in 1 year, the Rabbanan would agree with as long as it happens over 3 years. And so therefore, again, in 3 different places in the field, that's the case over here. Mimata asar lebeisa, you have 30 trees, every 10 is planted in a beisa. The beisa tzarech l'eser netios, because a beisa generally has these 10 younger trees. That's the amount of space of the field that you have 10 trees. Kedamar below yachbor, that we say earlier in parak lo yachbor. Avol im pachos mi beisa liyuri lanos. Let's say you would have 10 trees in less than that amount of space. Hare smuchen biyoser, they're too close together. V'have kiyar, that would be like a forest. V'lo have a chazaka, that would not be a chazaka. Delo achzik kedim chazki inchi, because he's not making the chazaka in the normal fashion. Let's say they're spread out more than they should be. It's also nami lo have a chazaka. It's also not a chazaka. Bechol hakarka. It's not going to be a chazaka in all of the land. Ela keneged mash. It's tzarech lilonos. So he'll just get a chazaka according to the land that each tree or that the trees require, but no more than that. And so again, we derive achal yud b'shanazu. Let's say he takes from 10 of them in this year and 10 from the other 10 in the next year and from the third set of 10 in the third year. Harezu chazaka, that would be a chazaka. Techamisha hechzik gimel shanim b'chol hasada dami. That would be the same as having a chazaka over 3 years in the whole field. Shaya ochel b'chol hashana masha gadol bo, because he's consuming each year that which is growing within it. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph.